Good afternoon, everyone, and good day to all of you joining us on LinkedIn Live. We're delighted to have you back. We had an inspiring talks and sessions this morning, and for me particularly, I really like the connections between the startups and the different heads of the BGs. I really want to commend you on doing this at OPmobility this year. Very innovative and very powerful. So this afternoon, we would like to pull that thread of innovation and the use of AI a little bit further. And we decided to start this afternoon with a panel discussion on how to leverage AI in mobility and how to trust AI in mobility. And to do that, we assembled a wonderful panel. I'm delighted to have with me Laurent Favre, CEO of OPmobility, Bart Willemsen, who's a VP analyst at Gartner, Philippe Rambach, who's the Chief AI Officer at Schneider Electric, and Nat Ives, who's managing the regional operations of NVIDIA. So what you have in this panel, you have people running big organizations, big companies. You've got people representing some of the regulation part of AI, and you've got people representing the technology side of AI. So we'd like to start and dive into this exciting topic. And I'm going to start with you, Laurent. And you're a leader in the mobility sector. We saw it this morning with brilliant examples. In what areas do you see AI as having the biggest impact?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, we all know that the mobility segment is deeply disrupted or is transforming since a couple of years. And we have many challenges we need to face. I mentioned this morning that at the end we have to find a way to make the mobility sustainable, safer, and affordable. And therefore, everything is about innovation. If we are very concrete, I do see three main challenges for us for the mobility sector. The first one is for sure the energy transition. The energy transition, I think it's obvious, and we all talk about global warming. We all see the things on TV and so on. Therefore, there is an issue we need to face, and the mobility segment counts for 20 to 25% of the global CO2 emission. Therefore, our impact is huge. At the same time, the mobility is also the freedom we give to population to move, to meet, to exchange, which was never so important in the past, but also to transport goods. And everybody at home would like to have goods being ordered on Amazon or something else. Therefore, we need to find a way to make the mobility in line with the global warming. And for that, there is only one way, which is innovation, only one manner, which is speed, because it's pretty urgent. And that is why we believe, or we are convinced, that AI can have a fantastic contribution in innovation. We have been talking about materials this morning, for example, in powertrain efficiency with software, or really to optimize the powertrain of the vehicle, but also in the usage of the vehicle to prevent traffic jam and so on. Therefore, many topics AI can bring in terms of innovation to make the mobility, I would say, cleaner. That is the first challenge. I make short. Don't be afraid. The second challenge is about speed, yes. And therefore it will be faster. Now, the second challenge, if you take a company like OPmobility, we are working with all the customers, all the car makers, and the number of programs, the number of models they are launching is huge, much more than in the past. Because they keep the traditional vehicles, they launch also EV, they launch also hybrid, they have different design and so on. Therefore, we have more and more projects for less and less volumes. Yeah. And if we want to manage that, we need to be more efficient. We need to be more efficient in R&D. And that is also where we believe that AI can be playing a very important role to increase the efficiency in R&D. It can be 30%, to be faster and to be able to develop more solutions in a very short period of time. That was the second challenge. The third challenge is affordability. We tend to forget that at the end, it's not us deciding. These are the consumers. And the consumers, they want to have the best offer in terms of technology, but it has to be affordable as well. And that is a challenge the automotive industry is facing today, because the EV cars are too expensive. And with the AI, and we have been discussing about that this morning, and I'm sure it will be a topic as well, we can optimize the complete value chain from supply chain, manufacturing, SG&A as well, R&D, to make new products more affordable.
Great, thank you. So the energy challenge that you mentioned, how do we use AI to be more efficient and move at speed, and the affordability and link to mobility as well. That's an important topic. If we switch to you, Bart, increasingly we see we'll be merging personal data with urban management systems and forecasts. I'd like to hear your view on this subject, and particularly when it comes to the individual freedom that people have.
I like how you connect privacy with individual freedom. That's number one. Actually, there's two things that you briefly said, Laurent, that I want to touch on that I'd like even more. One thing is clear, we're not just talking about generative AI. This seems to be our STS, shiny thingy syndrome today. We're massively distracted by this, but there's so much more than this. Same as with mobility. You walk, you take a bicycle, you take a car, or you take a plane, for example. Each purpose has a different technology, and this is where the benefit lies for individual people as well. You can give personalized advice, but do you need to have knowledge of the individual? Not necessarily so. And in balancing the right choices in mobility, are you going to completely demonize one group in favor of another? Or are we going to, for example, only see public transport buses and not see a single taxi anymore? Do we favor nothing but cyclists because this is much better for the environment? I'm not sure. That balance needs to be there. And that means that the second part that I said, like that you said, using the right AI, not only the right AI, but also for the right purpose. We have something in mind. There's 3 points that you made, but you also mentioned very, very specific use cases. If we're going to use something for a specific reason, then it has to fit. And nobody ever changed their corporate strategy based on the information of one person. And I think mobility-wise, the larger the infrastructure, the larger the grid, we're not going to make decisions based on individual movements. We're much, much more looking at massive movements. But the individual can never be left behind in this storyline. And what we see there, and originally we talked about the combination of privacy and people having privacy is a major concern in the adoption of AI technology. Sure it is, but individual freedoms go much further than that. And the funny thing that we find is, I will not sound like a lawyer, regulations, thank you for that introduction, by the way. They're drier than a tax lawyer's final exam. I'll not go into that in too much detail, but the interesting thing here, and I'll briefly mention this, of course we all want to talk about not want to talk about the AI Act these days, but it is coming. The interesting thing there, it stands on the shoulders of established legislation. So, for example, GDPR, I think you in here call it LGPD, right? Is that, yeah, there you go, the French acronym, thank you. But what we are finding is that organizations who are deliberately doing proactively well and granularly controlling their data, they actually turn out to be much better in using AI technology just as well. I don't care how good your AI technology is. If you have crappy data, you're ending up with a crappy AI. And I'm using the polite word here, but this is proven, this is demonstrable. So individual freedoms is in part how well do you control your data, how well do you control your system, but mostly in part in terms of how do you intend to use this. The AI Act, very briefly again, it touches, for example, on this element of fundamental rights. If you have a high-risk use in mind, you must do a fundamental rights impact assessment. How relevant is that? Fundamental human rights, they've been in the making for like 7, 8 decades. We have them for a good reason. And now suddenly, because AI is the absolute amplifier of everything, we decide to call this out as, oh, by the way, don't forget this. So that's all I can say. Don't forget this. And final thing I will say there is that if you look at individualization, of course, transport choices, very much relevant for the individual. Your AI doesn't have to know individual people, not by name. It's nonsense. There's a great opportunity here for things like pets, privacy-enhancing technologies. Think about the relevance of federated learning, differential privacy. I will not include all the buzzwords here, but we see demonstrably that if you take out the individual reference, less discrimination takes place, believe it or not.
Great. Thank you, Bart. In your talk, Laurent, you made a very good link between the energy transition and mobility. So if I switch to you, Philippe, and see a little bit from a Schneider Electric perspective, how do you leverage AI from an energy optimization perspective? And maybe you can say a few words on Schneider Electric.
Yeah, I'll try to do that. So we do not produce electricity, but we are helping customers, companies, to use electricity, manage electricity, optimize their energy. And if you look at EV, I mean, obviously, I don't think I need to convince this room that if we want to go to a sustainable mobility, it's going to be an electrical powered mobility. Simply because today, electricity is the only source of energy that can be both abundant and totally decarbonized. However, unfortunately, it can be decarbonized. But if you run your car with electricity produced by burning oil, you're kind of back to square one. So the challenge that will come with the development of electrical vehicle is first an additional demand on the grid. Simply, people will need more electricity and will need to provide this electricity. Second, unfortunately, most likely, this demand will be rather concentrated. Probably at 9 a.m., when all of us will arrive at the office, plug the car to charge, and back again at 6 or 7 p.m., back home, charging. And guess what? Peak is not good for electricity. Peak is not good for carbon, because you always need to balance production with demand in electricity, as you know. And when the grid needs to provide power at peak demand, the easiest, and most of the time the only way, is to start fuel-powered power station, gas-fired power station. So not only at peak demand you pay your electricity at a high price, but it is highly carbonated. So, sounds bad, but this is where AI will help. And this is where AI can help at different levels. It can really help on what we call managing the demand, because when we think all together about decarbonizing the electricity, most of the time we think on the production side, bringing more solar panels, more wind generation, and we have to do that, no doubt. But there is also a lot to do on the demand side because of this famous peak. And if I focus that on where AI can help, taking very practical examples. Let's say you manage a fleet of vehicles, let's say your DHL or your Amazon. All your electrical vehicles come back, you can all charge them at the very same time and have a peak of demand on the network, on the grid. Or you use AI, leveraging the delivery you have today in the coming days, and you can optimize the way you charge to average the charge of your vehicle, avoid the peak of demand, therefore help the grid to use a less decarbonated energy. And if I go to the next level, a bit more systematic way, let's say, for example, you are in a building like this one, you have a car park where your employees charge their EVs, you put solar panels on your roof because you want to be a good citizen, maybe even some wind generation if you're an exceptionally good citizen. If you use what your solar panels produce or your wind generation produce, great, it's green, well done. Probably not optimum, because probably at the same time, the sun is shining for everybody. All the solar panels are producing, and the electricity is both cheap and green. If you use AI, you are able to forecast your production, you are able to forecast your consumption, then you can get from the grid when they plan to be carbonized, not carbonized, and every 15 minutes you're going to decide, is it better to use what I produce, better to sell it to the grid to help decarbonize, better to store for tomorrow. So AI, again, will help maximize the share of green electricity and reduce the peak demand. And the last thing, which excites a lot the people in the electrical world, is, of course, bringing electrical vehicles create new challenges, more demand and more peak demand. But it also creates a gigantic new opportunity, what we call vehicle to grid, which means if the grid is not only charging the car, but if the grid is allowed to take some of the energy available in the car batteries, that opens a whole new world of possibility, because you always need, as I was saying, to balance your production and your consumption. One way to be flexible is to have batteries. But batteries are expensive, we never have enough. In the world of tomorrow, if we could leverage the millions of batteries of vehicle cars, taking 10 or 15% of the load, we will not bring the car down to zero, but taking some of the load, that will open a whole new possibility of optimization at grid level to leverage the install base of batteries, the storage of energy, to be able to integrate much more green electricity, because as you know, green electricity is intermittent, therefore needs more storage. So the last thing for me, which is much more an opportunity, is combining AI with the storage of EVs and using EVs as a reserve of energy for the grid, for the country. So both a challenge, but also a great opportunity. And both the opportunity and the challenge will need a lot of AI.
Great. Very interesting. And behind everything you mentioned, Philippe, you're talking about how do you monetize the energy transaction. And if you do that, there's an element of trust that needs to be present. I'd be very interested, Nat, to hear your perspective from NVIDIA side on how do you manage this trust in the ethics and transparency of the models that we use?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us today, especially those of you online. I think most of you know who NVIDIA is, but for those of you maybe not clear on exactly what we do, we're basically a research and development organization who work on developing the software and the hardware that makes AI possible. I think we've heard there from Laurent, from Bart and Philippe around some really great potential opportunities for using AI, but we've also understood, how they're driven by extremely complex areas of data, no AI. And building trust is obviously fundamental in exploiting AI, because if people don't trust it, they're not going to use it. At NVIDIA, we try and work to build out trust on kind of 4 pillars when we're developing tools and technology for people building AI to use. The first one is around privacy. So we want to be able to enable people to develop AI that respects the laws or even just societal norms in terms of the privacy of data that they're using. There are a number of ways that we do this, but one of the really interesting ways is in federated learning. This is something that's pretty common now in the healthcare world, where we can join data sets together, respect the secrecy between them, but enable the AI to be trained. The second area is around safety and security. It's really important that people understand, Bart mentioned, putting AI in around a specific purpose and around a specific benefit, and I think we'll touch on the right sizing of AI a bit later on. But if we're going to say that's what the AI is doing, it's really important that people understand and can be shown that it's constrained in only doing what it's been designed to do, and that it is secure and protected from malicious cyber threats like any other piece of technology. The third piece is transparency and explainability. Now, this isn't easy. This is not easy, because AI ultimately is a bit of a black box. But we've put in place a bunch of processes, some of them automated even, that people who are building AI can use, that basically publish on what we would call a model card the way the AI has been developed, the data that's been used, and the way that it's been conceived and brought together. And then the final piece that needs to be optimized or promoted for trust is non-discriminatory AI without bias. That, again, is not always easy because of the inherent imbalances in the legacy data sets that we might be using. The world is not right now as equal and diverse as we would like it to be. I only have to look in the room to know that. If we don't anticipate that, we embed that inherent inequality or that inherent imbalance in the AI. So there are ways to do that. One is around looking at the output of the AI and measuring it and making sure that it is adjusted to be aligned to what we want, rather than the data that it was trained on. But the second way that we're increasingly doing that is using other AI to generate what we would call synthetic data, to augment the data set to address the imbalance in the data set and have it more representative of the role in society we want the AI to play.
Great, and we're going to continue on that thread a little bit for the second phase of this panel. We're going to stick to AI risks and ethics. How do you manage that? And I'll turn to you, Bart, and then I'll turn to you, Laurent. What steps practically can companies take to ensure the data used in AI systems is both accurate and ethically, responsibly sourced?
I think Nat just gave a fantastic start to that, because it's not really about only the lineage of the data. As I said earlier, I think all things start and end with purpose. No organization, none of us in the room here, if you're looking online, exists to use technology. We use technology to achieve what we exist for. Therefore, the right technology for the right job. So purpose really should be first. Think about it this way. A purpose is not as coarse as a whole process. In your recruitment process, for example, you can consider using an LLM to create your job opening text. That's fine, just create some text. Not really with any sort of harm. If you get 100 responses and you take all the resumes of these people and you subject that to the same LLM, you're making 2 mistakes. One, an LLM is for generating text, not for making decisions. And 2, if you would use some sort of decision engine to ask the model, hey, which of these responses fits best, now you're actually leaving a certain decision-making part on people to a technology. this is very ill-advised. So again, yes, there are many opportunities. Synthetic data is a very great one immediately at our fingertips, but there are definitely others as well. Most of the things are, I think, interesting looking over the last 2-3 years happening. When we asked organizations, thousands worldwide, what are they using? Several said that they were using dozens, if not hundreds, of AI models already. And mind you, this is before ChatGPT and everything it has become the unofficial poster child for. But 2 out of 5 also admitted that at the time they already, and this is 2 years ago, they were already experiencing a data breach or a security incident. 2 out of 5. Then there is this market development where we see a bunch of vendors who offer technological opportunities, proactive protection of privacy, model ops, specifically model monitoring, explainability functions. If you think AI is some sort of magic wand, sorry to say, you're not ready to use it. It isn't, but it has to be left in check. Monitoring the model, where can it drift? Spoiler, data will drift. Whether you had the right data or not from the very beginning, over time, the data, but the model as well, will drift. Is there technology that can help you monitor this? Yes, it is our responsibility to detect and intervene and correct before we continue. So this market space, at Gartner, we refer to this as AI TRISM. Granted, better acronyms may have been invented in the past, but AI Trust, Risk, and Security Management. And the interesting thing is when organizations start using this, at the beginning of this year, we had a couple of other surveys, and one thing was clear: if organizations use a multidisciplinary AI team, not just your AI scientist and your data scientist, but multidisciplinary, they at minimum see 10 to 12% more direct results and benefit, business benefit, value created, as opposed to those who don't. So it's an organizational step one. We're not even talking about technology components here. But we also see that when they're using TRISM technology, that 2 out of 5 data breaches is reduced at minimum by 10%. Again, it doesn't see much, but it does demonstrate if you're well enough in control of the data. And mind you, having more data does demonstrably not lead to better decision making. We know that is not true. Having the right data for the right purpose at the right question at hand. This leads to better decision making. Only that. So that means, purpose first, then task specificity. Isolate the task. Only now do you know what's the type of AI that I'm going to use, and only then can you see what's the potential impact that it can have on people. I mean, we talked about this recently. I think MIT has done some great work in publishing an AI risk repository, for example. Currently, I think there are 700 in them. I use them frequently with my clients. It's a growing, it's a living document. It's a growing body of work. But it does contain potentially every possible answer to the question, what could possibly go wrong? Okay, so what is our opportunity here to see where could it go wrong and actually proactively prevent that? I know that we spoke during lunch very briefly. Nat just said eliminating bias, but I know that we talk about it slightly differently, but we mean the same thing. Back to the notion of purpose. There's no such thing as really making sure there's no bias whatsoever. Yeah. Looking at a data set means that if it doesn't fit the purpose, then the bias must be controlled more.
I'd be interested to hear your views, Laurent. As an industry leader, how do you see those technological changes from the perspective of risk and trust? And should we be afraid?
I think first of all we should be very excited.
Yes.
I think it's the main purpose of that is the reason why we are doing that today.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we don't want to be afraid. We want to be excited about the potential of AI. And I mentioned before the challenges we are facing in the mobility industry, and we are convinced that AI can be a strong enabler to face it or to make it happen. Therefore, the target is to be very excited. I'd like also the team to be the OPmobility team to be very curious, positively excited, and really to take it as a huge opportunity for us. And then, when we talk about opportunities, we talk about the potential use cases and what can AI bring us, and for sure the risk associated to that. And I think we have been talking about the risk, Bart recently right now, about ethics and so on. But first of all, please assess the potential before talking about the risk. Now, if we talk about the risk, maybe more specifically for us or for the industry, one risk is the safety. Do you want to delegate your life to a machine? Yeah. Well, sometimes to delegate it to a driver you don't trust as well, but at least do you want to delegate it to a machine? It's a big question, also in terms of adoption of AI, middle, long term. And second topic is about employment. And we know that many people are afraid about AI, not that citizens as consumers, but much more of employee. That means, what does it mean for me? Do you have a job in the future? It can be in the shop floor. It can be also in the offices. And therefore, I think it's really a topic we need to address, because it's also our responsibility. That means to care of the people. What does it mean for our people? There was a survey in France recently showing that half of the people, they don't trust AI because of employment risk, and massively for the older people, basically, and the younger people, they don't see that with the same amplitude, basically. But there is a topic around employment, and I think it's we have to communicate. We have to show that for sure that will be a change for all of us, but we will have also different tasks to be done, and it's a matter of education, of communication as well. But that's a risk I think we need to address. And I would say more broadly, I would say there is the topic of data management for sure. Yes. We've been talking about data quality, but also who owns the data? Yeah. What is the value of the data? Are we going to develop tax on data as well? Because data are becoming so important in terms of value. There is for sure a topic behind that. And cybersecurity, because if you talk about data, and you have to talk about cybersecurity, if you talk about autonomous driving, there is a big risk, basically, in case of cyber attack, that you can have a huge damage, and therefore those topics will be for sure on the agenda for the coming months and years.
Can I just double click on one thing that you just said?
Double
because
click.
we're talking in the mobility space here. One thing while you were speaking occurred to me. We don't necessarily trust technology, but we do have to trust the people who use it, who deploy it, and who give it to us. And what occurs to me, specifically since we're talking about mobility here, is how wonderful would it be if organizations deliberately, regardless of any type of regulation, let's forget that part of the conversation for a second, would choose to be Volvo. I'm not sure anyone ever had the benefit of sitting in a Volvo. You would see at the how do you call this, seat belt that has an inscription since 1959. At a time where ashtrays and cigarette lighters came standard, Volvo said, we value people first, so our cars are going to be safe. We're not waiting until some law mandates this, but you can trust us because we take care of you. The next 3 decades, most Volvos were sold because people were looking for safety. That's a different type of trust that you can only earn by making very hard decisions.
Good point. If we come back on responsible AI for you, Philippe, what does it mean for Schneider Electric?
So first, many things have been said, but what I would probably start with, and it's not nice, but that's what it is, first you have to comply. There is a lot of legislation all around the world, in Europe, in China, in US. We all have been through the GPRD. We will have to comply to EU AI Act. It's not a dream, it's not a fantasy. That will take efforts. And don't underestimate that. So I would start by the less nice. Then I would say after that, I think also if you want to really, and I'm double-clicking what you say, Bart, is if you really want to embark your employees, your customer into your AI journey, you need to define beyond regulation, beyond legislation, what it means for you, according to your value, your missions. If I take us, for example, but certainly it's different for OPmobility, different for Gartner, different for NVIDIA, but for us, we sell to our customer that we're going to help them save energy. So part of our responsible AI is checking that the way we do AI is energy light, that we don't use Gen AI when we can do it with simple models. We call that frugal AI. So part of our responsible AI is to do frugal AI. Another example is, okay, we sell to our customer that we're going to help them save energy. But the first value, back to Volvo, the first value they buy from Schneider is, my house won't be on fire because you're going to stop the power if something goes wrong. Yeah. You need to make sure that you design your AI systems in a way which is absolutely safe, depending what you do. If you do a game, probably not super important. If you do electricity or cars, it is super important. And back to what one of you was saying also is, this is where the multidisciplinarity comes. You cannot make AI safe by AI. It's a dream, won't happen. You can do AI safe by your system. And if I come back on our example of we help optimize energy in a building, we designed it in a way that if it fails, because it can fail, you stop saving energy, but you don't stop supply power to the hospital. It just don't get the savings, but it still get the power. So you need to have a system design around your AI, which means that if you leave AI only to AI specialists, it won't work. You need to put together, and in automotive you have dozens of years of experience of safety, FMEAs, all of that, and AI should be within that, not outside of that, so that doing responsible AI is certainly to do an AI which is safe, but again, which is safe in a system, not in itself. There is no way to make it safe in itself. And the fourth thing, maybe back on what you were saying, Nat, is we also need to stop dreaming, especially in Brussels. That if we want to make an absolute fair AI, let's stop it. My dream is not to make a fair AI. It's to make an AI which is fairer than the current world, an AI that makes the world more fair. And if I take the usual example everybody always takes, I'm sure you heard it thousands of times, Amazon. They had HR people recruiting people. They had biases. They made an HR model which replicated the biases. Great news, at least now they know they had biases. Without the AI, they would have continued to only hire white male 25 to 30 without seeing it. So to some extent, AI has shown it and make the world a bit more fair. And the last thing I would say also in the same story is there is one way to avoid any risk is to do nothing. I think it was Sartre who used to say, if you want to have absolute clean hands, cut your hands. Yes, but then, okay. So, yeah, there is a level of risk, and as every activity, we have to manage the risk in a responsible way, according legislation, values, purpose, company knowledge, and then we can make it work.
What you said about the system thinking you need to have is super powerful, because it was brought up by one of the speakers this morning as well, right? And in system thinking, we say that structure drives behavior.
Yeah.
If you have the right structure, you're going to have the right behavior at the end, and that's focusing on the structure is actually a very smart thing to do. On your side, Nat, how do you, from NVIDIA's perspective, what advice would you give your customers to overcome the risks and build trust with AI?
Yeah, so I think, I already touched earlier on that kind of privacy, safety, and transparency and equality points. That builds trust with AI, but, that's basically doing responsible work, right? So, most of you work in companies with some kind of corporate social responsibility goals and aims, and you apply that in every aspect of what you're doing. Why not just look at what you're going to do or you are doing in AI in the same way? That implies that the activities that you're doing with AI need some kind of quality framework and quality expectations alongside them, as you would do with any sort of large-scale, complex corporate activity, whereby, throughout the life cycle of the AI, you've got that traceability of how it's being conceived, where the data's coming from, and you've got that, breadcrumb trail of ultimately when it makes it into production, into your product, of how it was conceived and what was behind it, and you can then measure the efficacy of that AI against those responsible goals. I already touched on one area whereby you can, make your AI work more transparent in terms of model cards. So we have a tool called Model Card ++, and it can accompany your AI development and basically spit out the model at the end, the model card at the end, when you make the model, and you can then use that model card anywhere you're using that model to say, okay, this is the model that's in there, this is the data sets, this is how it works, this is the technology within it, this is how it was trained, etc. The second piece of technology, we're a technology company, so that's how we answer every question, that we have is something called NeMo guardrails. So amongst the many hundreds of software frameworks and packages that NVIDIA makes available in open source, one of them is NeMo guardrails. NeMo is our global framework for AI. Within it is a tool and a framework called guardrails. And essentially you can set up a piece of AI to monitor the AI output of the output of your AI system, and ensure that it is working on the domain that it should be working on, that it is doing the thing it was designed to do and nothing else, that it's not trying to access or not succeeding in accessing systems or controls that you didn't think it should do, and that it is replying in an ethical and equitable way. Now again, you have to train that to your own expectations, but there are ways to do that. That's not, it's an open source tool, but there's overhead when you put these things in place. So you need to anticipate that from the beginning, because if, let's say, guardrails rejects the response of the AI, one in, 20 times, it redirects the AI. That AI then has to regenerate that response and generate a new set of tokens. That's a whole load more cost and time and effort. So those things are not free, but they're things that we spend as much time thinking about and researching and developing as how to build AI itself. And then the final thing is we have a thing called Garak, which allows you to very simply scan LLMs for vulnerabilities. Like any other AI system, it's really important that when we deploy it in an enterprise kind of environment, that it's supportable, safe and secure like anything else. It has vulnerabilities, these things can be exploited. You need to respond to that, update them as quickly as possible.
Great. Go ahead.
Just maybe
You
one
want
thing
to react?
one thing that you make me think, which I think is important when you think responsible AI, and you said it, but I think I want to insist on that, is include the responsible AI aspect from the very start of the use case. Don't wait for the end of the POC, don't wait for the end of the industrialization, because it will drive you in what data you choose, what data you collect, are they biased, not biased, and we have stopped use cases simply because we couldn't find a way to make them responsibly. And then better not to start. So don't wait for the end. It's not the final check, oh, am I responsible? But from the very beginning, when you design your use case, you choose your AI model, you choose your AI approach, you choose your system, include the responsible aspect from day one.
Yeah, very, very good point. Back to the, having the right structure from the very start as well. We have 10 minutes left. We have two big topics to handle. So we'll do one on AI in the products. So that's user experience and AI. And I'll turn to you, Laurent, in a minute. And then we'll do the last one on AI and sustainability. And then we'll take questions. If you have questions, use the pigeonhole code. If you want to ask those very tough, nasty questions to these four gentlemen, please go ahead. I'll turn to you.
You mean for the other ones.
For the other ones. AI in the product. So you mentioned, Laurent, very interestingly, mobility is more than ever linked to affordability and user experience. And by the way, we saw that yesterday at Sigmatech very clearly on the kind of user experience you can have, even with a tailgate, even with a front end of a car. It's very, very surprising and very inspiring. How do you see AI functionalities in your products?
Yeah, I think I'm happy that you saw very nice things in Sigmatech. By the way, we will be in the CS in Vegas as well in Jan.
We saw,
Therefore, there are some people willing to join us in Vegas as well. It will be very exciting as well, because yes, with the technology we can embark, we can bring I would say much more value to our customers, to the end consumer as well. That means much more connected part than what we had in the past in exterior system. We know that the exterior is probably the most important for the car, because that is the identification of the car, that is the customization of the car, and tomorrow the car will be interacting with the people, and even more if the car are becoming autonomous, for sure, then there are plenty of opportunity. Another topic which is I want to mention again, even if you mentioned that we have only 10 minutes left, but that would be an issue for the colleagues, not for me. Now it's the fact that everything has to be affordable at the end as well.
Yes.
And because we know, I like to say that the citizen and the consumer, they can be the same person, they can be very different as well. And all the citizens are willing to have a more sustainable mobility, if possible as well, more connected. And the consumer, at the end, they have to pay it. And if they have to pay it, it has to be affordable. And that is what we need to work on. And we are convinced that AI can bring, for sure, new features in the products. Some of them I was mentioning before. Most of the people are living in big cities. This morning it was a nightmare for me to come to Paris because of the traffic, and Waze couldn't predict the traffic, and tomorrow the traffic will be much more predictive than today. Therefore it will allow us to have less stress, for example, for those kind of topics. It will allow also the big cities to manage the traffic jam and the different signal in the big cities. Therefore a lot of opportunities for us. But AI will bring also the capacity to optimize our supply chain, and I think we have been seeing this morning fantastic opportunities. If I talk about OPmobility, we have close to 400 million working capital. If you reduce the working capital by 50%, you imagine what you can invest in new technology, and it's huge. Therefore, we'll be able to do that. The same in manufacturing as well, quality, inspection, and so on, and R&D cost and speed. Therefore, it will bring us opportunities on product side, but it will make that affordable, because we'll be better in the complete value chain.
Great. Now I understand why you said we need to be curious and excited about this topic, because you have all those opportunities clearly out in your organization. Anyone wants to react on this topic before we move to AI and sustainability?
Maybe one thing. There's a bidirectionality to this. And we bring AI and applications towards the population, but there's also this supply chain connection. I think a very important part here is to get rid of the FOMO, the fear of missing out. At the beginning of this year, for example, we asked companies worldwide, what is your actual 2024 Gen AI planning calendar strategy look like? Because everybody was saying, hey, I'm hearing 99% of the world is using this, and if I'm not, I'm part of that 1%, I'm running behind, I don't want to miss out, you know? And we may be inclined to bring this to our customers, but think also about our own supply chain. What if your vendor suddenly has the same inclination to bring AI where it does actually not have a place? And when at the beginning of this year we asked this, I thought the results were pretty surprising. A little bit of realism, just for 2 seconds, if I may. Believe it or not, only 8 or 9% said we're actively endorsing, we're actively encouraging experimentation with this. And 1 out of 4, almost 22, 23% said, no, we're going to hold off while we're investigating. You know, is it responsible? Should we not? Because many of them actually kept in mind, have we forgotten the revelations of Time magazine of earlier last year about the tens of thousands of basically people working in modern day slavery situations to make this technology work. How is the technology sourced by us is important. How our supply chain sources it, I think, is just as important, because that reflects on us who uses it, not on them who gives it to us.
Nat, in your job, you see a lot of customers, right? So you see how they adopt and use.
I want to get in behind Laurent's excitement. So my uncle actually, when he did his driving test and he bought a Mini. I guess most of you know what a Mini is. And his first experience of driving on the road when he was 18 was so terrifying, and he had so many calamities. He sold the car and he never bought another car and drove a car again in his entire life. And he spent the whole of his very eccentric bachelor life having to beg help from friends or synchronize his ambitions to travel around the world with trains and buses, etc. And it, probably it was, in hindsight, quite a constraint on what he could do. If he were alive today, he might be able to jump in an autonomous car pretty soon, and that would, change the path of his life quite a lot. So I think that, we believe at NVIDIA that tech ultimately can be tech for good, and that, if we're responsible about how we conceive the use cases and we apply the technology in the right way, in a targeted way, it can deliver that good. And really, I guess, democratize a lot of the access to technology that perhaps has been difficult to do until now. So it's already happening. We see really nice targeted use cases where AI, be it generative AI or even just more basic machine learning, is delivering incredible benefit. But you can get in a car and say, please change the temperature to 21 degrees. Or actually, how about, I'm just a bit warm, and it knows what to do. And it can talk back to you in natural language. You can have an AI-powered concierge that can reserve your journey, control the car, etc. And, I'm sorry to be a bit morbid, but let's not forget that, the huge majority, like nearly all of road accidents, are caused by human error. Mm-hmm. An AI that can see further, see in all directions, see in multi-spectrums of electromagnetic radiation, process what it sees faster and make decisions, and has already driven millions of miles before it even starts on the road, is going to be much safer than my 16-year-old son when he starts driving next year. Well, that's not, I mean, it's funny, but for me it's not. I'd rather he got in a car,
Good luck.
Yeah, very good point. I wanted to hear your point of view, Laurent, on the fact that, of course, mobility is highly regulated environment. And how do you see the role of regulation with the adoption and the use of AI as well?
Mobility is very regulated because of the safety, for sure.
Yes.
And it's even more regulated in Europe, because in Europe we like regulation. By definition, we have many people taking care of regulation. And it is what's happening a bit on AI right now. And from one side, regulation is good if it's about protecting us. If it's about preventing us to innovate, that is an issue. And therefore, that will be the balance to be found between, yes, we protect what we have been talking about before, but we don't prevent companies like OPmobility or other companies to develop AI. And we have to be sure as well, or to make sure that Europe is not losing traction compared to the US or compared to China, because they will have potentially less regulation than what we have.
The good news is you have a very global footprint at OPmobility,
Yes.
so you can play on that.
Yes, but today already we do see that if we talk about, you saw before some potential application for autonomous driving, it will start either in China or in the US.
That's right.
And before Europe. It's also because of the regulation.
That's right. Yeah, good point. We have 2 minutes to address AI and sustainability. We won't do it justice, but I really want to hear your point of view on this, Philippe, from a Schneider Electric perspective. Is AI sustainable?
Yeah, first, if I take many step backs,
Yeah.
AI brings efficiency, and usually efficiency helps with sustainability. If you use less to do the same, it's always good for the planet. So overall, direction for me sounds good. Then if I focus on what many people have in mind when they think AI, they think we need to give so much power to NVIDIA, we're going to need a lot of electricity, they're going to create a lot of carbon, generate the climate, and so on. That's a risk, no doubt, and AI consumes energy. Nobody will deny that. But if we use AI for the right thing, which is using AI, in the case of energy, to use less energy and decarbonize, actually, I'm really more on the hope side. Just to give a few numbers, we have not invented, but we have developed the concept of return of invest in carbon. How much carbon do you generate to run your models versus how much carbon do you save, like how much money you spend for how much you save. When we talk about use case of using AI to save energy, for 1 ton of carbon emitted to run a model, you save between 300 to 1,000 tons of carbon. So AI, like many technology, used for the right thing, will be sustainable, will help the planet. AI used to write jokes for your neighbors on your office may not help much the planet. Hard to argue about that. But used for the right thing, yes, it works. It works very well, and the ratios are 1 to hundreds.
Can I just flavor that last point, because that's an excellent point.
30
Just to
30
flavor-
seconds to do that.
In 20 seconds. We know how fast we call models old. A model like GPT 3.5, we call this old. That was language only. That's not multimodal. It's already shown that 20 to 50 prompts with that model requires more than half a liter of water for data center cooling. Last year, the total number of data centers used an equal amount of energy as the country of Spain, ×2. So some of our colleagues are actually predicting that we're looking at rationing energy worldwide. We need to be so deliberate in how we use this that we actually, I hope, can still prevent this, because I want to get in line with the same enthusiasm.
Great. Before we switch to questions, which I'm sure the audience and people online have, maybe one word each of conclusion, or one quick sentence of conclusion around this topic. Laurent?
I don't know if I should say that, but I like to say attack. We like to say always on the move. It means always on the move in English for OPmobility, and yes, it's a great opportunity to move even faster.
Great. Bart?
AI, not a tool, but a toolbox. Choose the right one. When do we use a hammer, when a screwdriver, and when is just good old-fashioned duct tape good enough?
Great. Philippe?
First, yes to that, very strongly. And second, and I think you get it, but from my point of view, we will not decarbonize, we will not become sustainable without AI, because we will not move to EVs without AI. We will not move to green electricity without AI. So it's not even a question. It is needed for the complexity of energy and the world in which we are. We will not achieve the decarbonization target, the climate target without AI.
Yeah, I'm probably going to come back on the attack. I'm going to say avoir l'audace. This is new. There are complexities. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to learn things along the way. I think right now I go to a lot of these events. We have the same agenda. We talk about the same things, but it's time to start doing and to do it together. And stop looking at each other. My job is to convince you all to hold hands, shut your eyes and jump, and we'll figure it out along the way.
I must say that's extremely inspiring, and I say this as someone who works for an academic institution. We realize one thing is it's up to industry as well to attack, as you said, Laurent, to really push forward and be curious, be excited, and I felt a lot of that today, so I'm extremely excited. And just a note, most of the AI or Gen AI models today I generated in industry, not in academia anymore. So that balance has shifted, which is super interesting as well. All right, we're going to switch now to questions. So we have 15 minutes of questions. So we're going to see the first, a few of the questions. I'm going to step back to be able to read them. So, Oh, it's here. Okay, thank you. To OPmobility, Laurent, this one's for you. You talked about affordability in the mobility market. Can you please give us more details on how AI could contribute to that?
I think we gave many details already, but if I take only the supply chain, I was mentioning before, the working capital we have, the logistic costs we have, and with AI we can massively improve that. If we talk about R&D, we are convinced that 30% efficiency can be addressed with AI, and R&D it's a big part of the cost of the car, and so on and so on. It can be new material, it can be recyclable material, recycled material as well. Therefore, many topics will help us to develop, to produce mobility which is going to be more affordable.
Great, thank you. Who wants to take the second? Well, we'll give it to you, Nat.
I thought Philippe was going to answer.
I think that's one's for me. 2 out of 5 is a data point I briefly mentioned, right? 2 out of 5 data breaches.
No, well, it is addressed to NVIDIA, so I better reply to it at least.
Sure.
You know, AI is all about data. If I understand the context of the question enough, so you know, like any AI system using data, breaches are really dangerous, and we have to protect against a vulnerability like any other IT system. And NVIDIA spends a lot of time working with our own teams, but also all our partners across the industry to ensure that the same best practice around vulnerabilities, patching, monitoring, etc., in place around AI systems. I think we can also use AI to help. So, you know, there are a bunch of frameworks that NVIDIA works on that look at anomalies in behavior in data. So you could be very efficient in spotting data breaches more quickly. It doesn't mean that they won't necessarily happen.
Just to put some light on that data point, because I did briefly mention that 2 years ago, out of all respondents, 2 out of 5 said they did experience a data breach. Just bear in mind, folks, almost a third of these were external adversarial attacks the moment a model was brought open to the public too prematurely, wasn't ready, no protective measures in place. But more importantly, 62% of these breaches were the result, almost directly, of internal data compromise. And that just emphasizes the point that I made at the beginning of this roundtable. You control your data, you know what you have, why you have it, where you have it, and how long you should have it. Now you can actually operate your AI better as well. If you're lacking that control, it's a double-edged sword. It will hurt twice.
Great. We'll take the third one. Do you have tangible market observations for which building the tech in Europe actually becomes a competitive advantage because it is safer and more secure? Anyone wants to react or has examples of that? Philippe?
I can start, but first, okay, it's always painful when Europe regulates, but quite often it disseminates after that in the rest of the world. So complying with Europe quite often puts you in advance to other regulation. The second thing is, for me, as always, we should not isolate AI. So the strong points of Europe is good students, excellent engineers, lots of people with strong mathematician knowledge, and some key knowledge technologically. Europe is strong in energy, Europe is strong in automotive, and we should leverage AI to be even stronger there. Let's not try to beat NVIDIA and the GPUs. Battle is probably lost. But let's try to make the most clever cars, the most clever electricity, the most clever water distribution, where Europe is already strong, to be even stronger.
Yeah, great point. Anyone else?
I agree with this. There's one additional point here. We already know, and we said this about 20 months ago, that the future is not in large language models. The future is actually in fit-for-purpose smaller models. I've been talking with Nat briefly before we sat on this table about accelerator chips, for example, also fit for purpose. 1-bit language models, as they refer to other models as well. This is where the future is. So we can be, on the one hand, relatively, let's call it disappointed and see people across the Atlantic do whatever they think they want to do, and we're that polite kid in school who's not allowed by their parents to do something. But 2 years, 3 years later down the road, they may actually have done the dirty work. We can learn from that, and forgive me for saying this, but we can just piggyback on those knowledge pieces that we built up and do exactly what you just said, do what we do best.
Great. There's a question I really want to take about the future and the next generation as well. So try to put yourself back a few years. You're starting in your career. What advice would you have for a young engineer starting in their career today with the use of AI or even studying AI? Any reflections on that?
I mean, It's a long time ago for me. You can imagine.
I said a few years.
It was the last century, when I started. You can imagine. No, but I think for a young engineer, for a young person, or even for the other ones, I think the most important today is to be curious. It's really to be curious and to be open-minded. We are in a very exciting environment, much more than in the past. When I reflect to my past, everything is moving very fast. Technologies in mobility are not coming from mobility. It was always coming from mobility for mobility. Now it's coming from the energy sector, it's coming from software, it's coming from companies like NVIDIA and so on. Therefore, we have to be very open-minded and very curious.
Great points. Anyone else?
Learn the principles. Learn how to scale your principles. Not necessarily a specific language, not a specific industry, not even a specific technology. But if you get familiar with the principles, you can basically over time adjust and adapt yourself to whatever is then popular or make the next popular thing.
I would say it's another domain. I mean, as you could not call yourself an engineer 20 years ago or today, if you don't understand basic physics, basic mathematics, basic mechanics, basic coding, you have to understand basic AI. It's not an option, it's just another part of the science.
Yeah, but I really like what Nat said, reacting to the attack of Laurent. It's attack together. It's bringing people with different skill sets as well to really attack. And you do need people who have fundamental knowledge in mechanics and physics, etc.
I think the point about curiosity is important. I think AI is just starting. So if you want to ask me what's the best paid job in 10 years' time, I don't know the answer to that question. But I think the curiosity and the building of a network of people. I think as AI is able to do more and more for you, your value as an individual is based on your ability to interact with other individuals, which the AI necessarily can't do for you. So I think that kind of building a network, being more transverse in terms of your outlook and your skills rather than too pigeonholed. Is really important.
Yeah, and those soft skills, as we call them, the curiosity, open-mindedness, and the ability to network are things that AI cannot do, right? So it's interesting also to reflect on that. I'd like to take the question from LinkedIn Live. How much do you think AI will replace human tasks? Do you already have examples of that you see around you?
It depends what you mean by a human task, right? I mean, like, here in Paris, I think it's pretty unlikely that I will see restaurants or many restaurants with humanoid robots taking your order and serving your lunch. I mean, like, French people want to talk to the waiter, and that needs to be a human experience, and that's true in most places around the world when we come to eating. So, where there is a required level of humanity in the task, AI will find it very hard to replace. Other areas, I think my sister's a lawyer. She's actually pretty concerned about the future of junior lawyers and how they will train junior lawyers. They need senior lawyers, but they're not clear on why they're going to need junior ones in the future, so they don't know where the senior ones are going to come from. And so the impact on industries in that way could be really, really profound in terms of how the training and the evolution of the role of the industry and the people within it evolve. It's not going to go away. I mean, lawyers are going to make sure we still need lawyers, but how that role is performed could be very different.
Plus, they now have the AI Act.
Yeah.
Some work.
Keep them busy.
I'd like to take the question about China, because China is a big market, important geography for OPmobility and many companies, Schneider Electric as well. Are you able to monitor what's going on in terms of LLMs and new developments in China?
To a certain extent. We have a bunch of analysts in China currently, and they are gauging the temperature in the country. There's a funny set of things that are similar to what we have here. The regulatory landscape, for example. They started with infrastructure, then data, now AI. And basically the whole number of controls that are required are the same as we have here. The way in which you deploy those controls turn out to be relatively different. For example, take misinformation, disinformation. What is considered disinformation here versus there is considerably different. The fact that you have control what must be or what is able to be generated or what is able to be posted online, sure, it's still an LLM. It's still generating information, but what is allowed and what is not allowed, that's where the differences are. In terms of technology, I don't think we have to very quickly be considered blind on what they're doing. But I do think the question is primarily aimed at LLMs, and that's probably the risk. Most of the developments are on many other things. Detailed, granular, long-term analytics. Surveillance mechanisms, believe it or not. Globally, in all the products that we get from our Chinese apps as well. This is where it gets more fast into our, how do you call this thing, living room than to our workplace.
Yeah. On your side, Laurent, China is an important market and place and geography for you. Do you consider, for example, investing in AI development in China, for instance? Is that an option for you? Or are you saying, well, there's too many concerns, or we won't control it?
No, as of today, we don't. I mean, it's very important for us. We
Yeah.
have close to 40 factories in China. We are very happy with China,
Yeah.
but we like not to depend on China too much, and therefore we are observing China as a very, very innovative market. They are collecting much more data than what we are collecting. Yeah? You know
Yeah.
that. If you are in an airport in China, you're surprised sometimes about what they know about you. Huh?
Yes.
Which is scary from one side, but which is a huge asset for them to continue to develop AI. Therefore, yes, be there, but don't depend on what's happening in China.
Great. For you, Philippe, on the Schneider Electric and the unique selling proposal, the question on that, did the usage of AI in home or industry grid optimization really change the customer experience?
Oh yes, and if you haven't bought yet our solutions, go and run. It's an incredible solution, and we have a unique USP. No, I'm not sure how to take the question. It's still early days. Home automation is still early, industry automation is more mature, energy automation is still in the early days. But yes, it's really start to grow fast. The beauty of saving and working on energy is very often you have an opposition between I want to be sustainable or I want to be profitable. The great thing with electricity or energy, if people use less energy and energy outside of the peak time, it costs less and generates less carbon. So every driver goes same direction. Then adoption is always taking time, and not every home in the world is using technology. The sad thing, even if I'm still very optimistic, is in reality, if today we are deploying beyond Schneider, everywhere in the world, the optimization solution we have towards energy, the carbon problem is solved. The question is how do we deploy that everywhere?
That's a great question that each of you maybe can address. What is the level of freedom you're willing to give your employees to push you as a company when it comes to AI?
But that's also a very good question. I will start. We are willing to give a lot of freedom to our employees. We would like our employees to challenge us,
Yeah.
to accelerate in AI. I was yesterday in a factory with Youssef in Losorno, in Bratislava, and they are already using for many use cases in supply chain, quality control, and so on. I like it very much. At the end, we need to make it as a company strategy, because the strength of the company is to combine the forces and not to have isolated cases. Therefore, also for the employees attack, but then we need to make sure that there is a OPmobility AI strategy and not strategies.
Yeah, and back to the structure driving the behavior. You need to work on that structure around how you look at AI. Bart?
I already mentioned a number of figures. I don't say anything with regards to Gartner, how much Gartner is allowing this to use. I have no decision-making powers whatsoever at Gartner. But I briefly mentioned the survey, and again, quickly from the top of my head, only 8 or 9% are actively allowing and encouraging free, limited, unlimited, unbridled experimentation, whereas 1 out of 4 says, we're holding off, but we're investigating. 1 out of 10, well, 9%, again, from the top of my head, admitted that they don't have a policy on this yet. They're still thinking about this. And 5%, 1 out of 20, says, well, no, just don't, because we only deliberately want to funnel each and every single use case, think about this long and hard, and then maybe a little too hard. Just don't fall for the fear of missing out. Be realistic. Look at your own backyard. And where is it relevant? Where isn't it? I think we discussed it in 17 different ways at this table.
Philippe?
I mean, I won't speak for Schneider as a whole, but definitively, if you want to transform, you need to have a structured approach to AI. You also need to give your employees freedom. And I would remember when I started to work, there was always the question, like, should everyone have access to email? Then the next question was, should everyone have access to the internet? We all know the answer. We will all use AI daily as much as we can because it is helpful. Some companies will do it now, some in 1 year, but in 2 years, all will.
Nat, final word?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally this is about driving innovation, right? And there's no better source for innovation sourcing than your employees who understand your business and your customers probably better than anybody else. At NVIDIA, obviously, we're very interested in AI, so we're encouraged to use it as much as possible. We have a policy, but we also have the luxury of having lots of AI available internally to play with. But I think that, just to give a little insight, some of the world's most powerful computers are NVIDIA's for our own research, and we have a research team in AI of over 150 researchers doing really frontier work. If we don't do that, we can't build the systems and technology for the rest of the world to use. So we like to drink our own champagne and discover the problems and the pitfalls before everybody else. Anyone who wants to come and visit us, this is a plug, in either Santa Clara or if that's a bit far, Munich, I'd be more than happy to arrange executive briefings and you can come and see a little bit more of inside NVIDIA. More than welcome.
Great. Well, that's all. We have time for there's a lot more questions, but we only have time for the ones that were addressed. Please engage with our speakers. I really would like to thank the four of you for a wonderful perspective and insights that you shared with us very candidly and openly. And I'll just summarize with attack, because I think that's a brilliant line when it comes to AI. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, Philippe.
See you, Nat.
Thanks, Bart. Merci, Olivier.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're now going to switch gears. I think we're going to try to get some of the tables out, but we'll switch gears and continue to dive into some of the examples of applications of AI. And we're going to start with how generative AI is actually being used for scientific research. And that's a very important topic, not only for us at MIT, but for a lot of you here who are very driven by innovation and